Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this Euronews debate. My name is Jeremy Wilks. I'm a science reporter at Euronews, and today we are talking about innovation in rare disease, asking how Europe can become a global leader. And we have an amazing set of guests for you over a panel session, which should carry on for about an hour, a quarter or so. Please send in your questions. Let us know what you'd like to know about rare diseases. Let's introduce everybody on the panel. And just before we go into the faces you can see here, I just want to let you know that we have an incredible testimony coming up from Doddy Weir, MBE. He's somebody who was a Scottish rugby legend, played for his country for so many years, and now he has a rare disease called ALS, or motor neurone disease in the UK. And he's talking about what it's like to live with a rare disease and talking about his frustrations as well about trying to find a treatment. But I can welcome here now Yann, the CEO of patient representative group EURORDIS. We also have Alessandra Moretti, an Italian member of the European Parliament, David Nestor, head of Neuromuscular Diseases for Europe, Canada and partner markets at pharmaceutical company Biogen, and Nathalie Moll, the Director General of EFPIA, the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations. Also, in about 45 minutes from now, we have a special keynote speech from Sandra Galina, the Director General of DG Santé at the European Commission. And then after that, we'll have some other panelists joining us. Philippe Berta, a member of the French National Assembly and an expert in rare diseases, Dolores Montserrat, a Spanish member of the European Parliament and a former health minister of Spain, and Alexander Natse, the Secretary General of EUCOPE, the European Confederation of Pharmaceutical Entrepreneurs. So we've got a huge range of guests, really interesting topic. But a quick thought just to the panelists here. We're going to be talking about innovation in rare diseases. We've seen a huge amount of innovation when it comes to pharmaceutical industry in Europe, because in the last 2 years, we very quickly managed to develop a vaccine for COVID-19. Does that give you hope now, looking forward, for dealing with rare diseases? And I'd like to hear from Alessandra, please, first on that one. What are your thoughts when you see what we achieved with COVID-19?
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here with you. We know that the pandemic touched us a lot. Most of all, it showed us the importance of creating a European health of union, protecting the life and well-being of its citizens. The decisions by the EU institutions to face the pandemic together by avoiding a challenge among member states for resources, equipment and treatment showed us the power we have when we acting together. We learned that the European Union must have a stronger role in terms of public health and more responsibilities. This is what the citizens want. This is what the citizens are asking to us. This kind of approach is the only possible solution to tackle possible future cross-border threats concerning health. So yeah. I think that it's very important to go straight away this path. Thank you.
Very interesting. Yann, what's your feeling from a patient perspective about what happened there, and how did you feel about that related to rare diseases?
Yeah, first to remind that there was a hit hard on people with rare diseases, really, with disruptions of care. But if we look at the silver linings of it, first is the use of telemedicine, which was scaled up and for which there is high satisfaction from the patients and families. The second is the process of joint negotiation and procurement. It showed in real life that it's possible. It was not easy. There is obviously lessons to take, the positive and negatives, but there is a change of mindset, and it has opened up a path. The third is that we've seen that the European Fund networks, which exist for rare disease, have been used in the context of a health crisis like this one, with immediate feedback from the clinicians, from the patient groups about all the challenges faced. And that has helped really to reduce some of the challenges, such as prioritization or deprioritization of patients in the intensive care units when they are affected by rare disease. And my last comment is that I regret that in that period, there is no action to use the European Funds networks or new networking around the long COVID, the severe form of long COVID, where everyone is working in this little corner and are not working on the European scale to collect data, to analyze, to go faster.
Lots to dig into there. Natalie, from your point of view, what was has there been a change of mood?
I think what's important is that this moment now where the European Commission is reviewing the regulation and the combination with COVID made us as an industry look really deeply into what are the barriers. Why is it so hard to find treatments for rare diseases? 95% of rare diseases still don't have a treatment option. And one of the things that we found was a huge stumbling block is the science. Because the populations are so small, scientific knowledge decreases as the prevalence reduces, right? So, and we really looked into this and said, okay, we were in COVID, we were amazing. We collaborated, we did incredible, opened our databases and digital took off, as Yann just mentioned. And so we looked into, we need to, when we review the regulation, we need to make it possible to have a moonshot approach, a concerted effort towards developing the basic science and accelerating translational research like we did for COVID. And we really, as an industry, would like to put ourselves behind that. So learning from COVID, revision of the regulation, ideal moment to make the moonshot possible.
David, what are your thoughts from Biogen?
Yeah, look, I think the last 2 years have shown us in a crisis what we can do. And rare disease, we have patients that are very sick and often very incapacitated. And I think we've all grown very familiar with restrictions on our movement, being based at home, challenges of getting to the hospitals for treatment and multidisciplinary care. So I think there's great kudos needs to be given to the multidisciplinary teams that are managing and looking after this such wide and diverse group of patients and facing those challenges. So it's not all about drug development. It's about, getting to hospitals, getting the care, thinking outside the box and different and quite differently. So I think, we've embraced those, we've learned a lot. And I think that will help us in the future to think about the patient journey that people have to go through. What was normal for all of us, maybe lots of people on this call today that don't have a rare disease or don't have a disease, we face challenges about getting our milk and our bread every day. And it's sort of when something's taken away from you, it really resonates how life can be so difficult. So again, it sort of lights the candle inside me more and wants to work harder and better for the rare disease community. But, we've shown ourselves to be very innovative over the last 2 years to address the challenges we faced.
Fantastic. Thank you for those first thoughts. And there's lots to dig into there already. But I just want to now introduce a video which I think will set the stage a little bit for the situation with rare diseases. Let's just give you some numbers. So between 6,000 and 8,000 different rare diseases affect an estimated 30 million people in the EU today. And a rare disease is classed as one that affects no more than one person in 2000. And for the past 20 years, Europe has developed over 200 treatments helping 6 million patients compared to before 2000, when there were just 8 treatments on the market. And the reason that we had so much innovation was really actually thanks to EU regulations, notably something called the Orphan Medicinal Products Regulation, which came into force in the year 2000, which fostered the environment for the pharmaceutical companies to be sure that their research would be able to pay off. And now that regulation is under review. It's one of the reasons we're having that conversation today. Let's just have a quick listen to this video from Biogen, which kind of sets the scene for some of the questions that we have before us today.
Rare diseases are highly complex, often life-threatening conditions that affect 30 million Europeans. Due to their rarity, knowledge is often scarce and research limited. This community demands new treatments to hope for a brighter future. Over the last 20 years, a strong incentive framework has already delivered more than 200 medicines for rare diseases in Europe, serving more than 6 million patients. Today, as Europe shapes a new framework for pharmaceutical innovation, we must do more to address the unmet medical needs of this community. How can we protect the foundation of the system and create 2 more decades of life-changing innovation? How can we improve access to new treatments today and increase investments for the medicines of tomorrow? How can Europe lead an era of sustainable healthcare and make our industry more competitive globally? The fight against rare diseases is never fought alone. Only together we have the power to shape a brighter future for people living with rare diseases.
Well, there you go. That sets the stage, I think, for some of the conversation we're going to have. And thanks to EURORDIS, Biogen and EU40 for their support in making this debate possible. I'll go to Alessandra with my first question. 95% of rare diseases remain without a treatment. How confident can you be that the kinds of reviews that are underway, the discussions underway that you're taking part in, will create the right kind of environment to address the urgent need of all of those diseases that we have out there?
I think that we need to make a revision of the regulation on orphan medicines, for example. I'm convinced that the current rules have many positives and helped to achieve great results. At the same time, we believe it's not enough. Building on those successes and on the positive aspects of this regulation will be our objective, but we should not be afraid to intervene if needed to change things and make that better and better. We have to change something because the path and the objective is very, very important to achieve. So this is my opinion about that.
What do you think are the principal changes that we need to make to try and, we want to achieve two things at the same time. We want to kind of increase access to treatments. We want to open up the market, I suppose, and make things accessible. But we also want to stimulate the pharmaceutical industry and give it security and make sure that, from a strategic point of view, that Europe is strong in pharmaceuticals. How do you balance those two things, do you think?
It's not simple to balance these two things, but the European institutions have to think about a sustainable plan to allocate funds, and they have to do it with a long-term view for the future. This means that the funds need to be adequate, both to increase access to the existing treatments and to guarantee the research. This last one is the most important. In fact, today we know too little about most rare diseases, and this cannot guarantee proper diagnosis and treatment to patients. I think that a further step to take is to clarify what rare diseases are and to make them seen as a public health issue. Indeed, a rare disease is not unusual, and many people around the world are struggling in search of a diagnosis. At the same time, with the adequate collaboration at the global level and the level of data analysis we have reached today, we can understand things about rare diseases that were unimaginable just until a few years ago.
Yann, I'd like to bring in you on this. Do the patients share this point of view, and what's the kind of the pressing question, I suppose, that they're coming to you with now?
To understand what needs to be improved, we need to agree on what is the issue that we're trying to solve. And as Member of Parliament, Mrs. Moretti just said, we can really praise the success of this orphan regulation in Europe in terms of attracting investment and bringing new treatments to patients, more than 200 in 20 years. Now, let's look at the difficulties, the issues we have. We adopted this regulation almost 20 years after the US, which started in 1982. Since we have adopted it, there is more products designated as orphan in the US and more products approved than in Europe. There must be a reason. Also, we have not created an ecosystem which is sufficiently conducive of innovation in Europe between research, healthcare, data, and on the other hand, industry, regulation for incentive. The third issue is that we built a system on the upstream. So we have an EU regulation as part of the EU market to attract investment, to provide a common designation as orphan, to stimulate the development of the product. We have the European marketing authorization, and now we're going to have the European HTA, health technology assessment. And after that, we have still one public payer in every country, in every region, in every hospital, except that this is extremely fragmented. And this is where the failure is that there is no structured access from approval, assessment of value, and to access the patients. And this is where we need to link the system. So where we see the improvement to bring to these regulations is one, to take as a baseline the current incentive. Second, to modulate these incentives to address where the major pitfalls are, where the non-met needs of the patients, and on purpose, I'm not using the expression unmet needs, because I'd like to insist on the fact that what we need to look at is absence of treatment for most of these rare diseases, or no non-satisfactory treatments for the vast majority of them, in total 95%. Because when we say that 200 medicines approved are serving 6 million persons in Europe, true, but it's not curing the persons. It's sometimes transforming their life when we have a good, very strong drug, a breakthrough, but in most cases, it only alleviates some symptoms. And my last point is that in this improvement is the access. We need to think at this regulation to enrich it with what it doesn't do for now. In the last 20 years, this regulation was only upstream, up to market authorization, and then providing a 10 years market exclusivity. But it's not organizing at all downstream. Maybe it's time to organize downstream with this regulation. Now that we have the experience, now that we have a strong regulatory system in Europe, now that we're going to have a strong HTA at the European level too, let's move forward. And maybe we need to create new type of incentives within the regulation to streamline from the stimulation of investment and research down to the access to the patients.
Let me bring in Natalie or David. David, would you like to give your comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to build on that, because I think, first and foremost, we haven't moved in the last 2 decades that level from 8 drugs to more than 200 without the OMP regulation. So first and foremost, I think we need to take what's good from that, and that has created that sort of focus and need to address those most difficult situations. So it's important that we build from that. We know that it works. I think what Yann, when he talks about the ecosystem, is absolutely crucial. We have some parts of it that are a little bit more efficient and better, but often you find in rare disease, you're trying to put square pegs into round holes. The HTA systems or whatever, we're trying to get access to patients. For us, speed is of the essence. In rare disease, what people need to always understand is we don't have a long time. We're often working in conditions that if we can't find a solution within 12 months, a year, 2 years, these patients, these diseases are fatal. So the clock is ticking from day one. And I suppose the challenge for us today is that we know rare diseases is complex, from the epidemiology, from sharing of the knowledge and what we understand about the diseases, the clinical trial recruitment, the endpoints that we look at, how we then translate what we have an approved medicine to actually access locally. So for me, I think, yes, you have to look at that whole ecosystem, and it needs to fit together to reflect the uniqueness. It's really unique what we're trying to challenge.
Speed is what you're talking about, but I guess, we're talking about something that's incredibly complex. When I was chatting with Natalie yesterday, she was just saying this is just one of the greatest challenges there is trying to fix this kind of problem. How can you possibly go fast in that kind of world when you're facing such a complex challenge? Natalie, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. We were really fast with COVID, right? So it's different. Of course, the science was different, and we borrowed some science that had been worked on for 20 years. But I think what we saw with rare diseases is that there are different obstacles. So not only the incentives worked really well, and as Yann said, we have more than 200 products. We have a lot of SMEs that were built, but there are still enormous hurdles with the science. So I'm going to go back to my moonshot. We still need that approach. There is proposals for incentives, new incentives, I think fantastic, where unmet medical need persists. If you couple that with a scientific moonshot, so a real effort in those areas where really we have difficulty unraveling what's going on, and then accumulating those with existing rewards, making that very, very predictable, because that is important if you want to fill the space and make sure that we have investment in those sort of white spots. You need to make sure this is a 15-year investment here, so you can't have any sort of wobbly or changes in your incentive framework. And then you want to look at all the regulatory. We were also very good during COVID at regulatory flexibility. We set things in place with the European Medicines Agency that had never been done before for speed, which is exactly what was just being mentioned. And we can see how we can apply some of those things in the current committees at the European Medicines Agency, maybe connecting better the orphan drug one with the pediatric and with the Committee on Medicinal Products. How can we learn from the things that we did? And access, which is the last bit, which is the most important, because if the products don't reach the patients, what is the point? For us, that's such an important element and a multifactorial element that I think we certainly as an industry are committed to put things forward that show our responsibility, that we take our responsibility in that. I think we all have a shared responsibility. There's also a member state issue there. And I'm not sure you can fix that. I wouldn't put that in a regulation. I would take that very seriously with some approaches that are voluntary but transparent and visible, and share the responsibility for that access challenge.
Okay, well, I think it's time to hear from a patient, from Doddy Weir, MBE, who we were very lucky to have the chance to speak to. Let me just introduce him. If you're not a fan of rugby, then maybe you should check out some of the photos of this guy in action. So he's a former Scottish rugby international, 61 caps for Scotland during a successful playing career, represented the British and Irish Lions in South Africa in 1997 and won several championships with his clubs. And we started by asking him what it was like to live with ALS, also known as motor neurone disease.
MD has totally affected my life on a day-to-day basis. I think I'm very lucky in the way that I've been able to live with MD for 5 years. Now, after being diagnosed, the average life expectancy is 2 years. I've got to ask for help to get fed, to have a drink, to make a drink, to look at my mobile phone. I basically cannot do anything. And people don't understand that it's not very handy for even 10 minutes to do something like that. And I've got to do 24 hours of that. Get help throughout the whole day, so get help for getting dressed, getting help to go to the bathroom, as I mentioned, getting help for my breakfast, getting help clothes and dress in the morning, getting help go to the shower. Everything I do is required to be helped. But in a lot of positive ways, I'm still here, still smiling, still annoying the partner. So I'm one of the lucky ones, but it certainly puts a lot of pressure on my family and my friends, and I would have been lost without my lovely wife.
Interesting insight there from Doddy Weir, MB, talking about his experience of living with ALS. Reminder, he is the founder of the My Name's Doddy Foundation, which is a charity advocating for more research and for trying to find a treatment for motor neurone disease. We also asked Doddy to tell us about the moment that when he received the diagnosis and how he felt at that point.
Well, when I got my diagnosis, I explained it like, you maybe follow your skateboard and break your arm. So you go to the hospital and get an x-ray, and they say, yes, it's broken, but send you home to fix it yourself. So you therefore have to go and Google the split, the ligament and the casting to try and fix that broken arm. It was very similar to me with the MD. They go told you had this dermal issue. I sent home to try and find your own cure.
And as I said, and the Doddy Weir Foundation is advocating for more research to come up with a treatment, and his foundation has already donated £430 to the charity M&D Scotland and £770,000 to the M&D Association. Sorry, £430,000 to M&D Scotland, £770,000 to the M&D Association. We also asked Doddy about what he felt needed to be improved, some of the things that he felt frustrated about, and he said, in fact, the answer was very interesting. He said it's important to make sure that you tell the world about the research that didn't work as well as the research that does work.
But I can say one thing that I'm quite annoyed at, I brought up at the last meeting, is that I have reasons to believe that all trials, even if they fail, you do not need to publish the results. I think a lot of trials in M&D maybe didn't come together, but I think it would have been a great idea if the industry had published these, not mistakes, but failures. So going down the line when somebody else was to do something that's been done before as have failed, they could have noted that and tried to change it accordingly. So that's certainly one area I would like everyone to look at, even publish your failures.
Wise words there from Doddy Weir. Fantastic to have his testimony. Thanks very much for his team for setting that up. Taking that point that he's just made there, David, you're a fan of rugby, so you'll know Doddy from his previous life as a great rugbyman. But what's your reaction to what he had to say, particularly that last point?
Yeah, look at Doddy was fearsome on the rugby pitch, and he's carrying those qualities off the pitch as well. And I'd like to compliment him and congratulate him for the great work he's doing to highlight awareness and challenge us all, which is what we need to hear. You've said it. ALS is a rare, fatal, rare neurodegenerative disease that affects the neurons in the brain and spinal cord, and your voluntary muscles that you control, you lose those strength and you deteriorate, and it's fatal. It's a death sentence within 3 to 5 years. So very, very challenging disease. But I think the Biogen journey in ALS has been painful as well. Back in 2011, our first clinical trial in ALS ended in failure to meet our primary endpoint. And again, we had to learn from that, and I'm delighted. There's one thing I'm delighted to say to Doddy is we did publish those results, the Empower study at the time. And I think that is important. We need to learn cross companies, cross borders, cross oceans. We need to share information. And knowledge is power to make the next step. So I think that's first and foremost. And we've taken those learnings. We now have a more robust pipeline. There's only one treatment available at the moment in Europe. There's a number in development. Biogen is very focused on both the known genetic causes and unknown causes. And we have several compounds in development, as I said. But you're looking at about 10% of all ALS cases have that genetic element. We've, overall globally, I think we've defined around 25 different genes. So it shows the complexity and the uniqueness of what a rare disease is, and all of the different pieces that need to be investigated and explored to find that sort of ultimate cure. But again, from an industry perspective, what we need here is a very stable and predictable regulatory framework, and equally an access framework as well. And to incentivize that research and make sure that we continue to invest and find those solutions. And we have to accommodate the unique challenges here, such as real world evidence. That has to come to the forefront now, and using that really to progress access for patients. It's all about time. We need to accelerate this, and we need to be flexible.
How far are we away from finding some kind of treatment for ALS? Does anybody care to have a guess at that, I suppose? And it must be a guess for the time being. Yann, any thoughts on that?
I think Yann is on mute while we're getting Yann back. Biogen is at a late stage with one of our investigational drug. And again, it's a perfect example of we're trying to find that pathway forward now. It's a drug that has a lot of promise, but again has not achieved its primary endpoint. So we're at the stage where we're at the table, with the regulators trying to find that pathway forward. And there are other compounds that are very close in that late stage. But again, there's lots happening there, but probably not enough and not fast enough.
Yann, are you back with us?
Yes, I don't know why I've been disconnected, although I'm on a fiber landline.
It's no problem. It happens. What's your feedback really on what we've just heard from David and also from Doddy as well?
Yeah, first, I really support what Doddy said on publication of when there is clinical trials which have failed. It's important knowledge, as David mentioned, to go for the next step. So that's supposed to be normal, good practice from not only company, but also from any researcher, because there is also research performed by academic team in clinical trials, not at regulatory standard and not being published. So it's across the board. It's not just industry. But maybe the smallest company are not so keen to publish compared to the biggest one. But the more general statement really is that I'd like, if I can do that, is to refer to my personal experience linking with Doddy, is that I have a daughter with 32 years. She has cystic fibrosis. You look at her today, she's just a stunning, beautiful woman, has Alessandra Moretti or Natalie Moll in this call today, and she's an international lawyer. That's what you see. But the reality of a disease along the course of her life is that you need different treatments, different innovation at different time. Because you can have a treatment acting on the mechanism of the disease, but before that, you need something for infections. You need some things for your pancreatic function, which doesn't work. Then after that, you have a lung transplant. You need other type of medicines or surgery techniques. And after that, you're going to need a kidney transplant, and that's other treatment. What I want to mention here is that we should not think of rare disease and treatments that waiting for the magic bullet for each of the rare disease, and then just counting the number of medicines approved. Oh, fantastic. We have 120 indication, 120 problem solved. Absolutely not. It's an incremental innovation, an incremental improvement of care. And maybe at some point, you end up having a curative treatment, like a gene therapy, a gene editing, or whatever will come up, or a stabilizing treatment for your lifelong without apparition of new symptoms. But that's rare situation. That's the future that we want. And I'd like to go back to what Natalie said before, is that we are in a fantastic moment of science, of technology. Maybe someone needs to switch off to mute because we have an echo. Sorry. On the science and technology potential, which is huge. And we performed with an initiation, in fact, of the European Parliament. So thank you for the parliamentarians, but also funded by the European Commission, a foresight study called Rare 2030, which looks at the trends in the future of 2030, 2040, and what are the possible scenarios. And in this work, Imperial College London analyzed that based on a retrospective analysis of the last 20 years in the US and in Europe, so FDA, EMA, that the trend with the current regulatory framework is 600 new therapies by 2030, which sounds great, but by far insufficient with the unmet needs. But that there is the potential to go to 1,000 in the next 10 years if we improve some of the research environment, ecosystem, and some of the regulatory measures. And that's our job. That's our job with the next regulation, in terms of regulation, in terms of policy and non-policy, to create this favorable environment so that we get to 1,000 new therapies. That's the moonshot that Natalie mentioned for the research. So we need to improve this upstream before marketing authorization so that there is more products being developed, more investment, particularly more investment in Europe rather than science going to the US and coming back as a product in Europe. So competitiveness of Europe in research, that's the first thing, and in investment, and that we can incentivize also, and that's not going to be all into the orphan regulation. It's also national policy, tax deductions, other measures, but it's also to create this environment of research, which I mentioned before, to be conducive, to be attractive. We need to invest into European clinical research networks embedded into the national healthcare systems, so that we can find the patients for clinical trial. We can generate the data much faster with standardized approach across Europe and connected to the US, because for most of these rare diseases, for about 4,000 of them affect less than 1 person in 1 million in the population. So less than 400 in the...
Yann, can I bring in, you've brought up so many changes that you would like to see. Can I bring in Alessandra and say, what's in your mind when you're listening to this? And is there kind of are there priorities? Are there hierarchies? What are the things that you think we need to do, particularly with the orphan medicinal products regulation, to kind of take it to the next level?
I agree with Yann, because I really think that we need to invest more and more in the research and in the innovation and in technologies. It's very important. And over the last 20 years, innovation surrounding rare diseases in Europe has improved with a specific framework put in place by the EU, called the Orphan Medicinal Products Regulation. Now, the challenge that we are facing is devising a framework that improves the development of these products. In fact, innovation for medicines and treatments that are essential for those affected by rare diseases is notoriously changing due to a lack of knowledge in this field and a small patient population. Due to the low prevalence of each disease, medical expertise is rare, knowledge is scarce, care offerings are inadequate, and research is limited. Despite their great overall number, rare disease patients are the orphans of health systems, and they can often face denied diagnosis, treatment, and the benefits of research. So promoting rare diseases as a public health priority is one of the most important objectives we have to reach. And the path that we need to follow is to improve and to help with a lot of resources to research.
Well, yeah, I'm interested to hear about what you hear in the corridors of the European Parliament, because coming up in a few minutes' time, we're going to hear from Sandra Gallina from DG Santé from the European Commission about her view on how to accelerate innovation on rare diseases. But and you've said, obviously, it's a priority for you. We know, the French EU presidency have said it's a priority for them. But is it a priority for other countries in Europe? Are your colleagues from the south and from the east of Europe also interested in engaging with this and kind of singing the same song, I guess, that I'm hearing from you, that we need to have ambition on a European level?
Yes, I think that European Parliament understood the importance to create the European Union of Health, because after pandemic and we understood really well that our health system, national health system, are very, very weak. And so we need to give to the Europe level more and more competencies. The priority of the European Health Union we have in mind should be equal rights for everyone in EU. This means that every patient across the EU should enjoy some basic right in terms of access to health services. In order to do so, we have asked the Commission to present binding regulatory measures to ensure that access to life-saving health services is guaranteed, with binding minimum standards in terms of health care. We need to protect the concept that the public health is being protected, and Europe has to protect public health.
Yeah, we talk about a Europe that protects us, and I understand, I suppose, that there has been a shift because of the changes coming from the Commission, which were accelerated to an extent, I suppose, by the mindset change that we all had with this pandemic. But I'd like to go to Natalie now, and something that Yann raised, which is about relations with the United States, and to what extent we need to be working on a larger scale and working with the US? And is that something the pharmaceutical industry that you represent would embrace?
Yes, and actually it links to something I did want to mention, the clinical trial transparency. So, by legislation where we are obliged to make our clinical trials public, the results, whether they're positive or negative, but actually together with the US Association, FPA and Pharma in 2013, went beyond the legislative requirements, and we published a set of principles on clinical trial data sharing, really with that in mind, sort of increasing the sharing with researchers, but also making sure patients were aware of what's happening. So that's an aside, but it's just to tell you that it's been happening on very different levels. And as Yann said, the research is global and our companies are global, so they're constantly working with each other. And you saw that also during COVID. But another thing that Yann said, which is very important, is that we want the clinical trials here. We want them in the US as well. But it's very important that the research and development is also done here, because those clinical trials, to link to what David said, with the clock ticking, are what sometimes allow patients to survive. And if we don't do the research and development here, because the incentive framework is not conducive or not competitive enough, it can be good, but other parts of the world are more attractive, we will not be able to have the clinical trials here. We will not be able to reach those patients at that crucial moment when we might be able to save them or extend their lives. So it's so important.
But you're saying basically the knowledge and the action needs to be happening here on European soil.
It can happen everywhere else as well, but here we need to be competitive enough to keep it and grow it here, because our patients here deserve to have access to those clinical trials just like anywhere else in the world.
Yann, can I bring in you on that one?
Yes, it needs the cooperation. When we speak about European policy, we need always to be mindful, as you mentioned, Jeremy, and as Alessandra built up, that at the end, it's not only European Commission or European Council or Parliament. It has to be every member state on board and to take their part. So when it comes to research and to build on that, there is first a maturation from the member states to understand that in the area of rare disease, specifically because of the rarity, we can be strong only by collaborating together in Europe, but that we need to factor immediately that global perspective. And to your question before, Jeremy, we see this leadership of France today under the EU presidency, where they're trying to promote a new policy framework for rare diseases and potentially a European plan of action for rare diseases with ambition. But there is other countries on board. Czech Republic has officially announced that they are fully supportive of that, and they will organize also a big conference under their presidency on the 25-26 of October, an expert conference to try to shape both this European action plan on rare disease and the revision of the regulation on orphans and pediatrics, because all of that is linked. Why we're asking for European plan is not because we love the plans, is that we need a comprehensive approach that goes across the different EU policy area, from research to healthcare, digital, social, and industry and growth. But at the same time, integrating member states and also going towards specific goals, not just to do, but to do for certain results, to reduce the time for diagnosis for patients, to increase the years of survival, to improve the well-being.
How does the community how does the community decide on goals? Because there are so many rare diseases out there. Sure. How you can prioritize?
We have an answer to that, and it's called Rare 2030, precisely that foresight initiated by the European Parliament and funded by European Commission. And we were part of it with academic leaders. And there was a large consultation over 2 years of work of 200 experts from all different stakeholders across Europe, national conferences, consultation with surveys, and we identified specific goals. One goal is on diagnostic, that there is consensus that from the average today in Europe of 4 years for diagnostic for rare disease, we can go to 6 months within 5 to 10 years, if we really want it. Just because we have the technology and the know-how and how to proceed, we just need to scale it up on newborn screening, on early diagnostic when there is something wrong, either for children or for adults. We can improve survival by 3 years on average. Why we can say that? Because it has happened in several rare diseases. Yeah. So we can scale it up. But
David, can I bring you in on this? sorry, we're going to run out of time soon, but David, can I bring you in this point of screening and being systematic about that? Because when we had a conversation, we're preparing for this, you were talking about that quite passionately. Can you share some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we have a great example in when Biogen brought the first treatment for SMA patients. And again, this is a condition that affects babies all the way up to adults. And, you know, young babies that get type 1 SMA, you know, they would die within a very short period of time. So again, early treatment, all of the studies are showing the earlier treat, the better the outcomes. And the best case scenario for these SMA patients is, you know, when they're pre-symptomatic. So that means they need to be tested newborn screening when they're born and be treated before these symptom onset. When that happens, and when you have medicines then and the ecosystem around it to manage these patients, they're meeting the normal milestones that, you know, children can aspire to meet. So again, you know, it starts so early in that patient journey and pathway that we need to be working. We need to be all inclusive end to end. And it's a great
example. You're telling me at the moment, though, across Europe, there's not that systematic screening?
No, it's not. I think Biogen has worked across a number of different countries to develop pilots and to provide the evidence that this does work. And we've seen some great success in Germany and Belgium and Italy and Poland. But we're still behind. And when we talk about being competitive, when we talk about having all that infrastructure, we're probably in that genetic testing piece and newborn screening, we're probably behind the US there. So we need to support and be creative there to make sure that that's put in place, because that's what makes the ultimate difference for these patients.
I know that we're starting to run out of time on this panel. We're going to move on to the message from Sandra Galina from DG Health very soon. But I just wanted to go to Alessandra. I suppose, can you give us some signs of hope, I suppose, that we're going to be able to tackle this question? We've had 20 years of good innovation, as we said at the beginning, because the regulatory framework was there. Do you think we're going to get this right for the next 20 years? Because the people who are watching this live and the people who are concerned by this, they're really banking on it.
I think that the big solution and the big challenge that we have is the European Union of Health. And member states, we know that member states have exclusive competence when it comes to management of healthcare system, but the EU has shared competence for public health matters, has great powers when it comes to the pharmaceutical, for example, legislation, has a big in the field of research and innovation. So yes, for me, healthcare systems are managed at national level, but the EU can and should create the conditions for every patient to have the chance to be cured, high level of quality level of the cure, and accessible and equal treatment. I think that this is a very important and strong goal that we have ahead.
We're going to be wrapping up this part of the panel now, and then listening to a message, as I said, from Sandra Galina, and then carrying on the conversation with some other panelists. Yann is going to be staying with us, but thank you for those thoughts, Alessandra Moretti. Very interesting what you're saying about the level of ambition, and I feel encouraged by that. Also, from what I'm hearing from David Nestor from Biogen and Natalie Moll from FPA, it sounds like we're at least aware that we need to take action and that there's a kind of momentum now building. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, let's listen to this keynote speech. Thank you very much to Sandra Galina, who recorded this and sent it over to us. She's the Director General for the DG Santé, the European Union's Director General for Health and Food Safety. Let's have a listen.
Thank you for inviting me. Sorry not to be, I would say, in person with all of you. Dear Mr. Wilks, or dear Jeremy rather, and distinguished guests, I would like to thank you for inviting me for one reason. I'm very attached to rare diseases, and even if it is in a virtual way, this is for me a major occasion. Yann and many in your group know that the Commission is very committed and has been committed for over 2 years to tackling rare diseases. Rare diseases, but not so rare as they actually affect 36 million people in the EU. The prime example of the commitment has been the European reference networks, which have proven their worth since their launch in 2017, because they have brought together more than 1,500 of the most specialized centers across the EU to date. In January, new ERN members joined the existing 24 networks, almost doubling the size, I would say, with the technical and financial backing of the Commission. This is certainly an achievement. An important element of the networks, and I think everybody realizes that, is the activities that they have in creating EU-wide registries that link all the repositories that exist. Now, once fully operational and populated with clinical data, these will facilitate the development of clinical research in the field of rare diseases and will improve healthcare, but also planning of patient care. I would say that integrating these registries into the European health data space is going to be a very important step, a major step, because this will create a sea of opportunities for patients to access their data and to foster research and innovation. Just yesterday we had an event under the French presidency on the European health data space, and the issue of rare diseases was mentioned too. Later this year, we intend, together with the member states, to start integrating these national systems with the launch of a joint action plan with integration of the ERNs into, I would say, national healthcare systems. So I think this is a most important element. As well as this is ongoing work, the Commission is also improving the network's funding scheme through the EU4Health programme. And I would like to thank all those who contributed for ideas on this. Now, the Commission ambitions extend beyond these already fruitful areas, of course. By the end of the year, as you may all know, we are planning to propose a revision of the legislation of the medicines. And this includes also the revision of the medicines for rare diseases. And we would like also to evaluate the cross-border health care directive, which includes provisions on cooperation on rare diseases and ERNs. Now, I would like to finally mention that to tackle these diseases, we need a lot of research. And Horizon 2020, the EU framework's program for research and innovation, will make available close to 900 million euros up to 2027 to more than 160 collaborative projects that are related to rare diseases. I do expect that that money goes to some good use and bring fruitful results. Now, we may be proud of some of our accomplishments, but I am acutely aware that there remains a long road to travel. So I wish you a fruitful debate, because we need your work and we need to fight rare diseases.
Many thanks to Sandra Galina for that message, and we're going to unpack some of what she was talking about in the next part of this discussion here live on Euronews YouTube channel, where we are discussing innovations in rare diseases, asking how Europe can become a global leader. And thanks very much for your comments and questions that are coming in. Let's introduce the panelists we have here. Yann, for those of you who've been watching for a while now, you'll know him from EURORDIS, from the patient group EURORDIS. And just next to him, Dolores Montserrat, member of the European Parliament from the European People's Party, a member of the Committee on the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety, former Health Minister of Spain. Alexander Natz, the Secretary General of EUCOPE, the European Confederation of Pharmaceutical Entrepreneurs. And then we also have Philippe Berta, a member of the French National Assembly and an expert in rare diseases. Thanks very much, everybody, for being with us for this live. What's your reaction? Dolores, the first question for you, really. What's your reaction to what you just heard from Sandra Galina? Microphone mode. Yeah. There we go.
Okay, perfect. Do you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes, very well.
Perfect. You are asking me about the key recommendations from the European. Yep. Okay. Look, first of all, thank you very much for having me here today, sharing the opportunities we have ahead in fighting rare disease during what will be the next European decade of health, the Commission, based on research results from the Horizon 2020 program, has declared health inequalities among the top 4 challenges Europe faces in healthcare. So, and the more than 36 million of European patients who suffer from the disease are among the ones who suffer most a lack of access to effective treatment. So European citizens want answers and solutions that truly reflect the ideal of well-being and healthcare that Europe represents in the world. The European pharmaceutical strategy, for which I have been the rapporteur in the Parliament, wants to be a concrete answer to patients' needs. It has 4 main objectives: ensure patient access to affordable medicines and address unmet medical needs as rare disease. Second, promote the competitiveness, innovation, and sustainability of the European Union pharmaceutical industry. Third, improve crisis preparedness and response mechanism and address security of supply. And 4, ensuring a strong European Union voice in the world by promoting high standards of quality, effectiveness, and safety of treatment. So we put rare disease in a primary place in the strategy through initiatives such as the review of pediatric and rare disease medicines regulations to improve the regulatory environment, to implement pilot projects and studies to identify the causes of lack of access to innovative medicines, a stronger promotion of research and innovation, and to create a European space for access to an exchange of health data. So the strategy represents a roadmap that over the next 5 years aims to radically improve patterns of research, development, production, distribution, and access to medicines, with priority given to unmet medical needs, putting the patient truly at the center of the process. So I think so that this perhaps can be, the first view and the first roadmap of this strategy on rare disease.
Let me bring in Philippe, and you've been carefully listening to all of this conversation in our virtual green room, I know. You hear this ambition on a European level. You're a member of the French Parliament. What do you see from your point of view as the kind of the brakes to slowing down or what are the brakes to this change that we want to have to try and deal with rare diseases?
Yes, thank you for this invitation. Indeed, in the old time, I was a basic scientist. So I want just to mention, I earn about 900 million euros in the Horizon 2020 for the next 7 years, so it's next 5 years now. And what I want to say is we definitely need to boost basic research on rare disease. And we need greater funding. And we probably need also a better public-private partnership. I don't know if people know, but most in the European rare disease ecosystem, we have delivered in the past, and we will go on carry on deliver continuous innovation. Most of the orphan medical products are new technologies such as cell therapy, gene therapy, and so on. And over the 1/3 of the most transformative medicine over the past decades were developed for rare disease. And what I want to mention, because I'm not a rare disease specialist, as you said previously, but all what is done in this field of rare disease, will be very, very useful to tackle other more common disease like cancer and so on. And so this news that we will have more money for our groups, on a collaborative money, because if it's at the level of the Europeans, they will force European scientists to work together. So that's definitely a very, very good news.
I'm going to bring in Alessandra. You represent a lot of small companies, SMEs. Do they agree with what Philippe's talking about this kind of need for public-private partnerships? And are they excited about the funding opportunities on the European level, or do they not necessarily see that there are enough opportunities at the moment?
No, I would absolutely agree, and thanks for inviting me. It's a very important topic, also to talk about funding opportunities for pharmaceutical companies, smaller companies, but also bigger companies. I think it's really critical that we have Horizon 2020 dedicating money to that specific area. And I would also like to echo what Philippe Berta said before, that very often you learn from rare diseases also for the non-rare diseases. Very often you see a compound developed in a rare disease for a rare disease, and then that compound might also be working for a non-rare disease. So there's a lot of learnings, and it absolutely makes sense to focus in Horizon 2020 and all the funding programs the European Commission has been setting up to rare diseases. Let me also mention a little bit about some other activities which we find critical, but also reflecting on Sandra Gallina's talk before. We also think that the European Reference Network, as it was mentioned, launched in 2017 only, is a tremendous effect, and it shows what the European Commission can do to tackle rare diseases. It's about building the right networks, the knowledge clusters about rare diseases. It's so critical, so important to get this knowledge together. So with small things, with coordinating things, you can do a lot. We also would tend to agree very much with the need for registries. It's really important. We are currently part of a program which is multi-stakeholder real-world evidence for decision, which also looks at rare diseases in particular, where we're looking together with payers and HTAs, how can we make better use of real-world data? Because especially in rare diseases, there are a lot of learnings when those products are brought to the market, because we are talking about very often an unknown territory, and we are learning when we see the product to be used in a wider scale of patients. So that's really critical, that we take those learnings and that we have a robust methodology to meet the demand of the payers, the regulators, the patients, and all people involved, the HTAs and the payers, not at least, at last. That's really very important that we are using this data much better, and the European Health Data Space is a very important step in that direction. So we appreciate very much that idea.
You think it has some genuine promise then, the European Health Data Space, in rare disease specifically?
Yeah, I think it creates lots of opportunities, really, to integrate, as Sandra Gallina said, to integrate registries into the European Health Data Space, because again, we are learning a lot when those products in these orphan drugs are released to patients. Are really not just where we're learning is not necessarily in the clinical trials. We are also learning very much later on when the product has been released to the market, and it's really critical that we're connecting the dots also here to bring all stakeholders in. And this is what we're doing in real-world evidence for the decisions. And there are other multi-stakeholder initiatives, Trust for Rare Disease, and so on, which we're part of. So that's really very important.
One of the things I really wanted from this panel is to get some national perspectives, because we have different nationalities represented. Philippe, can I come to you and just ask, what is the situation related to rare diseases in France? How do you see the setup at the moment compared to other countries? What are the frustrations that you have in dealing with the challenge of rare diseases now?
Yeah, it's frustrations are the right term, to be honest. It's still very difficult to talk about rare disease in France, because we still miss a basic communication directed to the general population and also directed to the politicians to let them know what is a rare disease. When you talk about rare disease at the French Assembly, for instance, usually they just understand the term rare. So they think that if it's rare, it doesn't matter really. Okay, so it's a long work. And I try to do my best in the last 5 years to explain that in France it will be 3 million of people, and mostly kids, and we can't leave these kids by themselves. We have to improve our knowledge. We have to find also an economic system, because I think that will be the main next step for all of us. But in France, we need to I mean, rare disease will place a heavy burden on society due to the cost of care and the socio-economy burden on the health system. So we have to think right now to a new economical system to have access to these new therapies. And anyway, it will be the same even today. It's already the same story in France to have access to CAR T cells in oncology. So we have to think all together, and I think at the European level, how to improve this economical system to be sure, as Alessandra said previously, each citizen, each European citizen has the same chance and the same equity of access to this therapy.
Let me bring it. Dolores on this one from Spain. What's your point of view? Do you share some of the frustrations that Philippe is talking about, or is the situation in Spain quite different when it comes to rare diseases?
Yeah, let's see. I'm going to explain an experience that I had when I was Minister of Health in Spain. We managed, and I think that it's a good example that I try to include in the European pharmaceutical strategy, and I think that it's an opportunity to do this kind of examples all around Europe. When, during my time as Spain Minister of Health, we managed to make Spain one of the first countries in Europe to include, for example, in public health care, the medicine for spinal muscular atrophy, a rare and serious disease that leads to deterioration of lung function and which affect in Spain about 300 to 400 patients in Spain. So with this drug, we launched a new model for approaching the treatment of ultra-rare disease with a high economic and health impact. So which include the establishment of a pharmacoclinical protocol and a registry for monitoring therapeutic effectiveness. We achieved this by working together, the ministry, the Spanish Medicines Agency, the experts from the autonomous community, so from the regional governments, specialized professionals, patients, and industry. So it was the first time that we put all together. These are the opportunities ahead of us, and this is the commitment I want Europe and all the governments of the member states to make in the fight against rare disease, to ensure that all citizens have equal access to the best available treatment. So what Director Galina told us can be considered an European Union plan for rare disease, integrating national plans and European networks, thanks also to the new resource available through the European Union for Health program to support the recovery and the resilience of our health national systems and make them able to effectively care for the health of all without leaving anyone behind. So what we did in Spain, the experience exactly what it was. Before, we didn't have any protocol, any dialogue between all of us. Before, you could have a strike before in front of the building of the minister of the patient, with all the patients, and then the industry far away from the ministry. So I decided to put all together. Let's put everything on the table. Let's everybody that know this rare disease with the patients, with the specialized professionals, and the industry that they had a new drug, and with all the Spanish agency, and let's try to find the way to put quickly this drug in our national system, because I want it and we wanted to achieve and to give the access to all the patients in the same time in all around Spain. So at the end, we did it, and I think so that it was a really, really good experience that I wanted to export in the agreement of La Valletta, that La Valletta will lead all the ministers of health from the south of Europe, Portugal, Italy, Malta, Greece, Cyprus, and Spain, because we did this agreement of La Valletta to try to do an agreement of the rare disease drugs. I think that sometimes when you are alone as a country, it's better to do it all together, the European Union. So this is where I put on the pharmaceutical strategy, and we approve that we can do, of course, like we did with the COVID vaccines, that we did a central central vaccines to buy it all together, all the European Union. We can do it the same for the rare disease, because we cannot allow these big gaps that sometimes we have from, since the EMA is approving a rare disease drug until this drug gets in the market. Sometimes it's 3 years or more. It depends of the state member. So I think so that this experience in Spain was really good, and I think so that the strategy, the new strategy, will give hope to all the families and of course to all the specialized professionals.
Of course, speed is something that came up in the previous part of our discussion. And I'll go over to Alessandra. Now, you're not a representative of Germany, but you are German. And so you can tell us about the situation in Germany, which I think will complement what we have from the other two countries. And speed, is that something that the German healthcare system is capable of offering when it comes to rare disease treatments?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I would say yes and no. It depends. And the answer is, like the previous panel talked about newborn screening. It took, for cystic fibrosis newborn screening, I think it took GBA 6 years. It's way too long to make a decision about a newborn screening program. So we need to get quicker on this. Newborn screening is essential. We've heard it in the last panel. I totally agree with this one, especially in rare diseases. It got a little bit better with SMA. That was a bit quicker, but on newborn screening, I think in Germany, we need to get quicker. The good thing about Germany is that we have access on day one. When the product is approved by EMA or the European Commission, there is access to that medicine. We have the other good news is when it comes to rare diseases, we have all but 2 rare disease medicines, orphan drugs, in the market in Germany since 11 years ago. There are just 2 exceptions where the company didn't agree with, on a price with the payers. So that's good news, because there were many to come over the last 11 years. So that is really because the system says yes to orphan drugs, and we hope it will stay like that after the EU HTA system comes into place and interacts with the German system. But in Germany, the significant benefit of an orphan drug, which is given by the European Commission under the assistance of the COMP and EMA, is very much recognized. It's recognized by the payers. They recognize the fact that not all data might be at the table for all medicines at time of launch, and they recognize the fact that there is the need for real-world evidence that companies can generate and commit to generate the data the payers want to see later on of the lifespan of a medicine when it's used to a broader population. So in that sense, there is good news from Germany, and I would wish that in the discussions we're having about the EU HTA, when we're coming to methodology, that is taken into consideration, that there is an orphan drug designation, which includes a decision by the EU institutions, Commission, about significant benefit. I think that's very important.
Yann, can I bring in you on this point? What are your thoughts? You've been patiently listening to all of this.
Different thoughts. First, really, I'm happy to hear the attachment and enthusiasm of the Director General of DG Santé on rare disease. We really need that commitment. And what is important at that moment is to bring the different pieces. Sandra Gallina listed the revision of the Pharma Regulation General, in particular for fan medicines and for pediatrics, the European Funds Network, the evaluation of cross-border healthcare, etc. So she mentioned all that. She also mentioned the funds and strategy of Horizon Europe and the digital strategy. And that's our point, is that to do that well, we need to have a consistent approach across, not in 2 pieces. And this will help tremendously, because European Funds Network, we all recognize the achievement, we all see the deployment with more centers, and the fact that now there will be a joint action across member states to embed the European Funds Network within national healthcare systems, so to go down and close to the patient. So that's fantastic, really the right orientations. But there is confusions around other topics, registries, for instance. From the conversation I just heard, I need to dispel some confusion here. There is a lot. When you hear that, you have the impression that today DG Santé and Commission have solved the problem of registries because we have few standards, because we have GRC, which is a storage for data, and because we are funding few registries for few rare diseases. But that's only part of the solution. We need also the European Health Data Space, but that has different objectives. Here we're talking about electronic patient files, electronic prescription, We're talking about portability of data for patients or lifelong. We're talking about elements which are completely different than what you do with a registry in the healthcare system, which is to improve your health practice, your treatment practice, and to plan your social and health services, which is again a different objective than what you will do with Horizon Europe for clinical research networks, which is about readiness for clinical trials at the standard of the regulators as needed by industry and by regulatory and HTA. So there is a lot of confusions, which then at the end, because all of that is confused and because we're not clear about what we want to achieve, or at least some people are, that then you have answers like, oh no, we're not going to do that in research because we already do it in health, except that, guys, you don't do it. So we need to clarify all that, because we're losing years and we're losing life by the way we do it. So that's my reaction, is that I think there is such a dispersion of work between the thinking, which is fantastic in a report like the one of Dolores Montserrat, and I cannot thank her enough for the quality of the work of a group and recommendations, and also the quality of other works like the Foresight Rare 2030 or the work on European Health Data Space. But we need to bring all that into a much more synthetic action and line of actions. And not everything is solved in regulations and policies, but also in the non-policy, on how you bring the people together around projects, joint action, infrastructures, and etc. And we need a new ambition here, which we heard from our two parliamentarians also, and from industry representatives, that we need a new ambition, which is not just a list of what we do, but what needs to be done to get where we want to go to address the cumulated unmet needs of patients in Europe.
Dolores, can I bring you in to react to what Yann just had to say about this need for a holistic approach? Dolores, can you hear me?
No, sorry, because it's not working my computer.
Okay, no problem. I was just saying, in terms of what Yann just said and the need for a holistic approach, is that something that echoed and resonates with you as well?
Well, I think that the pandemic has shown us that only unity and solidarity allow us to effectively confront health threats that know no borders. So what the European Union has achieved with the development of the vaccines for COVID-19 is unprecedented in our history. It is a clear example of what investment in research and development towards innovation can achieve if we pull together our efforts and research. So I think, and perhaps I would like to add here, that for me it's very important because, my party and me, myself, I push for that. It's the European Union for Health. Never before we can say that European Union, we don't have competence on health. In the treaty, if we are looking, the European treaty, we can see two articles that it's talking about the competence of the public health in the border. That's all. So I think that the lessons that we learned from the COVID, it is that we have to build a European Union for health. We have the European Union for the money, the market, the movements of the mercancy, persons, professionals. So I think so that now it is a big opportunity for all of us, and of course for all the rare disease patients. It is the European Union for Health. Why? Because it's going to give all the resources, the instruments, the tools, and the finance to get it. We start to put, during this COVID time, we start to put the first tool. The first, it is the COVID vaccines platform. The second one, we can say that it is the new program of European Union for Health. Never before the European Union, we had our own health program. Before you could find some little programs or individuals programs inside of the big programs as Horizon program. So now we have one own and an autonomous program that we call European Union for Health, and has 10 times the budget that before had as an individual programs. Third thing very important is the European Beating Cancer Plan. It's another instrument very important here for the European Union for Health. Inside of this program, we are treating the rare cancers on adults and pediatrics. Then the fourth thing very important, very important is European Union. It is the strategy, the pharmaceutical strategy, on what I was the rapporteur. So we have, this incentive framework for innovation, but I think, and we have to say that this is the decade of the innovation, of the research in Europe, and to build this European Union for Health, that this brings hope to our patients, but will bring, sure, a lot of access to a new innovative drugs for our patients. So
can I just bring in Alessandra on this, though, because we're talking about these frameworks, we're trying to set something up for the future. As far as Alessandra, for the companies that you represent, who are small companies, newcomers, is the framework the right kind of framework for them? 20 years down the line, are some of the smaller companies you represent going to become giants because we set the right rules in terms of this strategy, or do you think it's slightly off at the moment?
It is. We've seen 20 positive years in that sense, that we're tackling or addressing some of the rare diseases. We have many products in the market, which I'm sure we wouldn't have if we wouldn't have that EU framework with incentives for rare diseases. I'm sure we wouldn't have those products because of the effects known in the market. So I think in a way you could say it's a success story, definitely. And I think we need to get better, and I totally take what Yann has been mentioning before. We need to get quicker, we need to get bigger, better, not necessarily bigger as companies, as you said. It's not about the company itself, it's about, like, a small company can be very agile and good in doing research and bringing products even. But we have to get a bit quicker, and I think we have founded a group which is called the OD Expert Group, where again we have a multi-stakeholder group which is very critical. We have 14 recommendations which are very clear, where we think the Commission and also the Parliament and the Council later on should be looking at those recommendations because they are critical. It's from the company perspective, it's very much about predictability. I need to tell my investors how much in times of exclusivities I would get for that product. I need to tell my investors at the end of the day, is it secure that I get an orphan exclusivity for that compound? And so anything we're doing in fine-tuning the criteria for the incentives is critical and needs predictability. And this is where we see the urgent need to really look at those recommendations which we have put forward. But also, ultimately, it's also about the reimbursement at the member state level. And this is where the pharmaceutical strategy, I totally would like to echo also that the report of MEP Montserrat is very well written in that respect. The pharmaceutical strategy is equally very important to get things right, especially when it comes to cell and gene therapies. Cross-border healthcare has been mentioned by Sandra Galina. So we also need to make sure that patients can travel from one country to the other. This legislation is also made for those type of specific diseases where you have few centers with expertise, and this is not just for cell and gene therapies, but in particular for cell and gene therapies, where not all the countries have the expertise in the hospital to treat those patients. So patients need to travel to the centers where the expertise is. That's something which we need to find.
Can I bring in Philippe on this, because I know you're very interested in gene therapies, and do you think that the kind of future that Alessandra's talking about is achievable? Would the French health system be flexible enough to kind of embrace this technology?
I'm not sure to answer this question first, but I want, because there's a point it's still very difficult in France, and Yann has perfectly this point. I want to talk about diagnosis, because everything starts by diagnosis, and we still have difficulties, because as far as I know, we can consider that maybe 50% of the rare disease patients are either not diagnosed or misdiagnosed. And I want to talk about the time. These diagnoses happen too late in many instances, and through a very, very long odyssey through the health system. So we have first to resolve this point. And my feeling, my hope at least, would be to resolve this point at the European level. We could consider to realize the same kind of diagnosis in each of our country. We did it in the past, in the 90s, for criminalistic, for instance. And we still have many difficulties in France to let access to our patients to the genomic sequencing, for instance. It's always very late. It can't be done in the first row. So why don't think right now to have the same way of diagnosis, and the best one, in all our countries? That would be one of my proposals.
That's interesting. Do you think there's flexibility, though, in the system and moving forward? Do you think that health systems in individual countries are kind of capable of innovating?
At least in France, we made progress, for sure. We have a lot other progresses to make in the early future. But we just realized that now we can have access to the market shortly. I mean, we were wasted for years and years before to have a drug on the market. Nowadays, okay, it has been shortened. So the political volunteer is there. Now we have to put more money in the system, and that's the main problem.
I'm going to wrap things up soon because we've gone over time, but it's a fascinating discussion. Let's just go to Yann for a final thought, I suppose. We've had a lot of discussions about the way we organise healthcare. We've talked about funding. Do we risk losing sight of the patient perspective, or is that always top of mind? I'm sure it is for you, but do you have concerns that in Brussels perhaps it isn't always the case?
I may have often concerns that it's a lip service, because somehow it always comes first that we're doing it for the patients, but then what comes after, it's not based on patient needs and addressing the needs. But I don't want to generalize, because I think we need to broaden a bit or perspective here, and I'm looking at what's happening in different parts of the world. We have a fantastic situation in Europe. We have a model of care for people with rare disease, and in fact, we need to be proud of it and to enrich it. That's the question. Yes, it's money, as you mentioned, but it's also collaboration, as Dolores mentioned, and Alessandra, it's collaboration. And we learned it the hard way with COVID. So let's take these lessons and let's have the ambition. That's the other thing. We need the ambition and the collaboration. And we need to accept that what cannot be solved, what was not solved before, can be solved. All this issue of patient data and digital health, and all this issue of access, it's all a matter of political will. And I'm optimistic because only yesterday, for instance, the successor of Dolores Montserrat as health minister in Spain has confirmed that rare disease will be a priority of their presidency, and that she will come 28th of February in Paris for the high-level conference on rare disease with the Czech, with the Swedish. So there is hope that we have a stronger alignment, but we need to go beyond or looking only at the wallet and the little power of each member state, and to get together to do much better to address these issues of rarity. And then we will become competitive, and then we will address more faster the needs of the patients.
Thank you, Yann. I'm going to wrap things up there. It's been a fascinating discussion, and thanks everybody for watching this debate, which was made possible thanks to our Euronews cooperation with EURORDIS, Biogen and EU40, who've been supporting us in organising this. It's been a really interesting discussion. Please send us your comments using social media channels. And in no particular order, I'll say thank you to the many guests and contributors that we had. Sandra Galina, Director General of DG Santé at the European Commission, Natalie Moll, Director General of FPA, the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, David Nestor, the Head of Neuromuscular Diseases for Europe, Canada and Partner Markets at Biogen, Alessandra Moretti, the Italian MEP, Yann Lecam, CEO of EURORDIS, Doddy Weir, Scottish rugby legend and founder of the My Name's Doddy Foundation, Alexander Natz, Secretary General of EUROCOPE, the European Confederation of Pharmaceutical Entrepreneurs, Dolores Montserrat, a Spanish member of the European Parliament and former Health Minister of Spain, and Philippe Berta, a member of the French National Assembly. Thank you very much for being with us in this discussion. It really has been fascinating. Send us your comments using Euronews social media channels, and you can See more news about healthcare and the evolution of technology on euronews.com.